In this section, I'm going to cover the different types of companies you can work for that need software developers. You're thinking to yourself, just about any company is going to need some sort of software developer, and you'd pretty much be right. What I've come up with are these 4 overall general categories for companies that need to do some sort of software development. We'll start with the first and most obvious company. Companies that primary business is not software. Software is in support. Then we have the ones that are the most obvious, where software is the primary means of business. They sell some sort of software. The next 2 are kind of similar, contracting and consulting. In contracting, people are the business. They're putting software developers in seats where they're paid hourly for some specific software service. The final one is consulting. And consulting can be like contracting, but with consulting, it's more strategic. In a lot of cases, consulting will involve an entire team of people from a consulting company as well. Let's talk about the not software company. This is the most common type of company. They're a company in which they use software, but that software is going to be in support of whatever their primary business is. This can get pretty blurry, especially as more and more companies become reliant on technology. There's also 2 types of not software companies. The first kind is the one where they don't actually do software development in-house and pay some third party, and the other kind is the one where if you're a software developer, you'll find yourself, and that's where they do software development and they do it locally. A good way to tell whether software is the primary business or not is if you shut down IT, will it still make money? Again, even with this being a gray area, at the end of the day, you can identify the not software company because they won't say they're a technology company. When it comes to the general not software company, I've come up with some pros and cons that are obviously some generalizations. They're not going to apply everywhere. They're just my general experience. The first pro is that they're the most common. Most companies out there are not going to have software as their primary business, so they're relatively easy to locate. They're also going to be older and generally more stable. Because they're not directly tied to the software market, their business has probably been around for decades. The other benefit is due to these companies generally not being on the forefront of technology, they're ripe for innovation, meaning there's lots of opportunity for improvement. A con, though, is that upward mobility can be limited. What do I mean by that? If you look at the CEO is probably not a software developer. They're going to specialize in whatever their primary business is. That also means that if you start looking up through the hierarchy, at some level, you're going to stop seeing software developers. That highest level where you see a software developer, for example, maybe it's an architect, that's as far as you can generally go in that company. While you may be able to switch over to the business side, this can sometimes be harder. Another con, besides generally being older tech, is that IT is seen as a cost center, meaning that it's an expenditure that's not considered a source of innovation at most of these not software companies. Now let's talk about companies in which software is the primary means of business. These companies will generally openly say, we are a technology company. And since software is the business, you're going to find that the founder, the CEO, and generally the senior staff are all going to have been software developers or involved in IT in some capacity. A pro at a software company is that there's lots of upward mobility. Generally, they'll go as far as to having 2 tracks, a management and an individual contributor track that very close to the very top are going to combine into your C level. Meaning that you can be an architect or a senior architect or some sort of senior technical fellow and be on par with some level of general director or maybe even some level of vice president. Since these companies are entirely based around software, they're generally going to involve newer technologies. So they're going to be on the leading edge of what is the software market. Innovation is going to be their business because that leads to some of the cons. Not being as stable. And a reason for that can be is that someone can come along and have a Facebook to your MySpace and all of a sudden you see your business cut in half. Software companies can also tend to suffer from what I call shiny object syndrome. Anytime something new comes along, focus gets redirected at that new thing. This can be a problem especially when not managed, because it prevents you from getting done long-term goals. Now let's look at contracting versus consulting. It's not exactly black and white. At the far end, contracting can be seen as just a solo assignment and putting what we call a warm body in a seat. It's the idea that someone needs some sort of software developer with a specific skill. For example, we need somebody who can do JavaScript development and knows Spring Boot. They don't have the time and the resources and the money to invest in a full-time employee, so they'll go out to a contracting company and say, we need 3 or 1 people that know Java and Spring Boot to come and do this work. On the other end of the spectrum, when we have consulting, we're talking about the strategy and partnerships, in which instead of a company saying, I need a warm body to do this specific job, they'll go to a consulting company and say, hey, I have this problem. I want to build this new product. How do I go about doing that? Oh, here's how I do it? Oh, no problem. The consulting company, we can provide you the 5 teams you need to build this product and then teach you how to support it. That's consulting. In the middle of that, you're going to find that consulting companies will also do a combination of contracting and some of the stuff that's in between when it comes to what I call group assignments. The idea that you're giving someone a team of people instead of just an individual. In the consulting space, it also tends to be more highly skilled. It won't just be a junior Java developer or a junior JavaScript developer. It's going to be somewhere more senior on the spectrum, and in a lot of cases at the level of an architect or a lead. You're probably asking yourself, contracting firms and consulting firms, how do they make money? Well, they make money off of something we call the margin. The way that this works, using this example, is that the rate for a person, let's say some sort of senior developer or a developer, is $100 an hour. That developer is not going to see $100 per hour. In this case, they're going to only see $80, 80% of that. That other 20%, that goes to the contracting or consulting firm. It can also get a little bit weird. In practice, you can have a lot of places, and I've seen this, where you'll have one company, a big company, realize that they're potentially getting swindled by all these different vendors. And so they'll lock down the vendor list and say, we're only going to take software developers from company A. So what ends up happening is that former companies B and C, instead of being able to bill the client directly, they're now going to go through company A, and company A is going to charge them both money for the privilege. And so you'll end up with these rates, for example, that can have as many as 3 companies that are actually taking from it. So in the case of our developer, the company is paying $100 an hour for them, but they're only seeing 55 of those dollars. The rest of that money, $45, is being spread out between companies A, B, and C. In terms of the pros and cons working for a contracting company, in general, you can find better hourly pay. This is because you're taking on a lot more risk. Contractors are the very definition of at-will employees. At a lot of places, firing a contractor or getting rid of them is as easy as clicking a button. If they're not working out, you can just let them go with no notice and no explanation. The other benefit is that there's a lot of variety in the work because you're never going to be tied down. And that's because, as the con states, the work's temporary. We can actually trace this back to an older lawsuit involving Microsoft, where a bunch of contractors got together and sued Microsoft, claiming they were entitled to full-time employee benefits because they had worked there for years. You'll now find what we call the 11-month rule in some places, where after 11 months, you have to leave or get some kind of special extension. The other con is that if you don't work, you don't get paid. You're purely an hourly employee. And so if you're not working, you're not getting paid. In terms of the consulting company, you're going to get better-ish pay. It's also very likely that you'll be a salaried employee. The consulting company itself will be making money off of the hourly rate being charged for you in terms of the margin, but they'll be providing you with an actual salary. Just like with contracting, you're going to have a variety. And with the other benefit being is, unlike pure contracting, a lot of consulting companies will pay you even if you're not directly billing. We call this the bench or bench pay. A con, though, with consulting companies is it may in fact not be consulting all the time. You can end up just being a warm body in a seat somewhere, which you may not want to be doing. The other con is these consulting engagements tend to be driven by what's called a statement of work. Somebody will sit down and draft what essentially is a contract stating what's supposed to be accomplished while you're there. Software is hard, and there's a lot of external factors that can impede your ability to accomplish what's in the statement of work. What I tend to see end up happening is that a project runs late, there's a dispute, and you end up having to do work on the part of the consulting firm for free so that you can get the rest of the bill. The other con is that you're expected to bill at all times. Anything you do that's outside of billing will be considered overhead and generally done, in my experience, on your own time. Want to have a group meeting amongst your internal team on your own time.